What happens when a racist bailiff tries to remove a black woman from court, only to be shocked by her fearless move to the judge's bench? Meet Naomi Brooks, an attorney known for her dedication to justice. But when racial prejudice stands in her way, Naomi takes a stand that exposes deep corruption and changes the courtroom forever. This is a story of courage, resilience, and the pursuit of truth. Stay tuned for a courtroom drama that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Before we continue, make sure to like the video and subscribe the channel so the community can grow, and we can bring you more stories like this. Now, let's get into it. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension and anticipation. It was a high-profile case, one that had captivated the nation for weeks. The defendant, a prominent businessman, was on trial for embezzlement, and every detail of the proceedings was being scrutinized by the media and the public. Amidst the sea of faces, there was one that stood out: Naomi Brooks. She was a distinguished attorney, known for her sharp mind and unwavering dedication to justice. But today, she was not here as a lawyer. She was here as a witness. Naomi took a deep breath as she waited for her turn to testify. She knew that her testimony could make or break the case. She glanced around the courtroom, her eyes briefly meeting those of the judge, a stern-looking man with a reputation for fairness. But not everyone in the room was so impartial. The bailiff, a burly man named Stan, had been eyeing Naomi with thinly veiled contempt ever since she had entered the courtroom. It wasn't the first time she had encountered such hostility, and it likely wouldn't be the last. Naomi was used to dealing with racism, but it never got any easier. As the proceedings continued, Olivia's mind drifted to the events that had led her here. She had been working on a separate case when she stumbled upon evidence that linked the defendant to a series of shady financial transactions. It was a breakthrough that had prompted the prosecution to call her as a witness. Finally, the moment came. The judge called her name, and Naomi stood up, her heart pounding. She walked towards the witness stand, feeling the weight of 100 eyes on her. She had just reached the stand when she felt a rough hand on her arm. Stan, the bailiff, had grabbed her. His grip was tight, and his expression was one of barely contained anger. "You're not supposed to be here," he growled. Olivia's eyes widened in shock. "I'm a witness," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. "I have every right to be here." Stan's eyes narrowed. "I don't care who you are. You need to leave." The courtroom fell silent as everyone watched the confrontation unfold. Naomi could feel the stares, the judgment, the anticipation. She knew she had to stand her ground. "Let go of me," she said, her voice rising. "This is a court of law. You have no right to remove me." The judge banged his gavel, his voice booming. "Order in the court. Bailiff, release her immediately." Stan hesitated, his grip tightening for a moment before he finally let go. Naomi took a step back, rubbing her arm where his fingers had dug into her skin. She glanced up at the judge, grateful for his intervention. "Ms. Harper, please take the stand," the judge said, his tone firm but fair. Naomi nodded and took her seat. She could still feel Stan's eyes on her, but she forced herself to focus. This was her moment, and she wasn't going to let anyone take it away from her. The courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations as Naomi composed herself. Her heart was still racing from the confrontation with Stan, but she forced herself to focus. This was her moment to make a difference. She took a deep breath and began her testimony. She detailed the evidence she had uncovered, explaining how the defendant had funneled money through a series of shell companies to hide his embezzlement. She presented documents, emails, and bank statements, each piece meticulously organized to paint a clear picture of the defendant's guilt. As Naomi spoke, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. People leaned forward in their seats, hanging on her every word. Even the judge seemed impressed by her thoroughness and clarity. But not everyone was so captivated. Stan stood at the back of the courtroom, his arms crossed and a scowl etched on his face. He watched Naomi with a mixture of resentment and suspicion. He couldn't stand the thought of a black woman standing in that courtroom commanding so much respect and authority. As Naomi wrapped up her testimony, the defense attorney stood up, ready to cross-examine her. He approached the witness stand with a confident smirk, clearly underestimating her. "Ms. Harper," he began, "isn't it true that you have a personal vendetta against my client? After all, you uncovered this evidence while working on a completely unrelated case." Naomi met his gaze, unflinching. "No vendetta, sir. My duty is to uphold justice, no matter who the defendant is." The defense attorney's smirk faltered. He tried to trip her up with more questions, but Naomi remained composed and unwavering. Her answers were precise and confident, leaving no room for doubt. After what felt like an eternity, the defense attorney finally gave up and returned to his seat. Naomi could feel the weight of the courtroom's admiration, but she also knew that the trial was far from over. She stepped down from the witness stand and returned to her seat, her mind racing with thoughts of what would come next. 2 days later, the trial resumed. Naomi arrived at the courthouse early, determined to see the case through to the end. As she walked through the halls, she noticed Stan lurking near the entrance, his eyes fixed on her with a cold, calculating stare. "Good morning, Miss Harper," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Naomi didn't respond. She walked past him, her head held high. She wouldn't let him intimidate her. The trial continued, and the prosecution presented more evidence, each piece building on Olivia's testimony. The defendant's case was crumbling, and it was clear that the jury was beginning to see the truth. 5 hours later, it was time for the closing arguments. The prosecution summarized the evidence, painting a damning picture of the defendant's actions. The defense tried to cast doubt on the evidence, but it was a weak attempt at best. As the jury deliberated, Naomi sat in the courtroom, her nerves on edge. She had done everything she could, and now all she could do was wait. 2 days later, the jury returned with a verdict. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the judge read the decision. Guilty. A wave of relief washed over Olivia. Justice had been served and her efforts had paid off. But as she left the courtroom, she couldn't shake the feeling that her encounter with Stan was far from over. As Naomi stepped out of the courthouse, she felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. The trial had been a grueling experience, but justice had been served. The media swarmed around her, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, but she pushed through the crowd, eager to get home and unwind. 2 weeks later, Naomi was back at her office, working late as usual. Her dedication to her clients and her cases often meant long hours, but she didn't mind. She thrived on the challenge and the pursuit of justice. It was a quiet evening, the office mostly empty. Naomi was reviewing documents when she heard a noise in the hallway. She looked up, her heart skipping a beat. It was Stan, the bailiff. He stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Can I help you?" Naomi asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Stan stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. "We need to talk," he said, his tone low and serious. Olivia's mind raced. What could he possibly want? "About what?" she asked, her nerves on edge. Stan took a deep breath, his demeanor shifting. "Look, I know I've been hard on you," he said, "but there's something you need to know." Olivia's curiosity piqued. She motioned for him to continue. Stan hesitated, then began to speak. "I've been working at the courthouse for years, and I've seen a lot of things. Corruption, bribery, you name it. But what I saw during that trial, it made me realize that some people will do anything to protect themselves." Naomi frowned, trying to understand where he was going with this. "What are you talking about?" Stan leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I was approached by someone. A man who offered me a lot of money to make sure you didn't testify." Olivia's eyes widened in shock. "What? Who?" Stan shook his head. "I don't know who he was, just that he was powerful and well-connected. He wanted to make sure you were silenced." Olivia's mind raced. Could this be true? Had someone really tried to sabotage her testimony? And why was Stan telling her this now? "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. Stan sighed. "Because I realized that I can't keep doing this. I've been complicit in too many things, and it's time to make things right. You deserve to know the truth." Naomi studied him, trying to gauge his sincerity. She couldn't deny that his confession had shaken her, but she also knew that she had to be cautious. "Thank you for telling me," she said, her voice measured. "But you need to understand that this changes everything. If what you're saying is true, we need to take action." Stan nodded. "I know, and I'm willing to help you. I have some information that could expose the corruption at the courthouse, but I need your help to do it." Naomi considered his words. This was an opportunity to uncover something much bigger than the trial she had just been a part of. It was a chance to bring justice to a system that had been compromised. "All right," she said, her resolve strengthening. "Let's do this." Naomi and Stan devised a plan. They would gather evidence of the corruption and present it to the authorities, ensuring that those involved would be held accountable. It was a risky move, but Naomi knew it was the right thing to do. 2 weeks later, Naomi and Stan met at a discreet location. Stan had managed to collect several documents and recordings that implicated several high-ranking officials in the courthouse. Naomi reviewed the evidence, her determination growing with each new revelation. "This is enough to bring them down," Naomi said, her voice firm. "But we need to be careful. If they find out what we're doing, it could be dangerous." Stan nodded, his expression serious. "I know, but I'm ready to do whatever it takes to make things right." They spent the next few days planning their next steps. They decided to go to the press, knowing that the exposure would force the authorities to take action. Naomi contacted a trusted journalist, someone she knew would handle the story with integrity. The journalist, a seasoned reporter named Lisa, met with Naomi and Stan to review the evidence. She was shocked by what she saw, but she was also determined to help them bring the truth to light. "This is explosive," Lisa said, her eyes wide. "But we need to be smart about how we release it. We don't want to give them a chance to cover it up." Naomi agreed. They spent hours strategizing, making sure every detail was perfect. Finally, they were ready. 5 days later, the story broke. The headlines were everywhere. Corruption at the courthouse exposed, high-ranking officials implicated. The public was outraged, and the authorities had no choice but to launch an investigation. The fallout was swift. Several officials were arrested, and the courthouse underwent a thorough overhaul to ensure that such corruption would never happen again. Naomi and Stan's efforts had paid off, and justice had been served once more. But the ordeal had taken its toll on Olivia. She had spent so much time fighting for justice that she had neglected her own well-being. She decided to take a step back from her work, to focus on herself for a change. 2 months later, Naomi was on a much-needed vacation, relaxing on a beach and reflecting on everything that had happened. She felt a sense of peace, knowing that she had made a difference. But she also knew that her fight for justice was far from over. As she watched the waves crash against the shore, her phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Stan. "Hey, Olivia, I just wanted to thank you again for everything. You've inspired me to keep fighting for what's right. I hope you're taking some time for yourself. You deserve it." Naomi smiled, feeling a warmth in her heart. She had made an impact, not just on the justice system, but on the people around her, and that was worth more than anything. She took a deep breath, savoring the salty air. The fight for justice would continue, but for now, Naomi and Stan had exposed the corruption, but their actions had also put them in danger. The powerful figures they had brought down were not going to take their defeat lightly. Naomi knew they had to be vigilant, but she also believed in the power of the truth. 3 months later, Naomi was back in the courtroom, this time as an attorney. She had taken on a new case, defending a young man wrongfully accused of a crime. As she prepared for the trial, she couldn't help but think about everything she and Stan had gone through. The courtroom was packed once again, and the tension was palpable. Naomi stood up to present her opening statement, her voice steady and confident. She laid out the facts of the case, highlighting the flaws in the prosecution's arguments and the lack of evidence against her client. As the trial progressed, Olivia's skills as a lawyer shone through. She cross-examined witnesses with precision, poking holes in their testimonies and exposing inconsistencies. The jury was captivated, and even the judge seemed impressed. But Naomi knew that the real challenge was yet to come. The prosecution had a surprise witness, someone who claimed to have seen her client at the scene of the crime. Naomi braced herself as the witness took the stand. The witness, a middle-aged man with a nervous demeanor, began to testify. He claimed to have seen the young man running away from the scene, but Naomi sensed that something was off. She approached the witness stand, her eyes narrowing. "Sir," she began, her voice calm but authoritative, "you say you saw my client at the scene. Can you describe exactly what you saw?" The witness hesitated, his eyes darting around the courtroom. "Well, it was dark, and I saw someone running." Naomi pressed on. "Are you certain it was my client? Can you be absolutely sure?" The witness shifted uncomfortably. I think so." Olivia's instincts told her to push further. "Think so, or know so?" The witness looked down, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Naomi had successfully cast doubt on the witness's testimony, and the prosecution's case was crumbling. 2 days later, the jury returned with their verdict. Not guilty. A wave of relief washed over Olivia. She had once again ensured that justice was served. Her client was free, and she had upheld her commitment to truth and fairness. As she left the courtroom, Naomi felt a sense of satisfaction. She knew that her fight for justice would never be over, but she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. She had proven time and time again that she was a force to be reckoned with, and she would continue to stand up for what was right. Back at her office, Naomi received a message from Stan. "Congratulations on the win. You continue to inspire me every day. Keep fighting the good fight." Naomi smiled as she read the message. She knew that she wasn't alone in her quest for justice, and that gave her the strength to keep going. She took a deep breath, ready to take on whatever came next. She was content to simply be, and that was enough. As Naomi settled back into her routine, she couldn't shake the feeling that their fight was far from over. The exposure of corruption had sent shockwaves through the system, and while it had brought justice, it had also made powerful enemies. 5 months later, Naomi received an unexpected visitor at her office. It was Lisa, the journalist who had helped expose the corruption. She looked anxious, her usually composed demeanor replaced with worry. "Olivia, we need to talk," Lisa said, her voice urgent. Naomi gestured for her to sit. "What's going on?" Lisa took a deep breath, her eyes darting around the room as if she expected someone to be listening. "I've been getting threats, anonymous messages telling me to back off, to stop digging into the courthouse corruption." Olivia's heart sank. She had feared something like this might happen. "Have you reported it to the authorities?" Lisa nodded. "I have, but they haven't been very helpful. I think some of them might be involved." Olivia's mind raced. They couldn't let the threats silence them. "We can't back down now. We need to keep pushing for the truth. If we give in, they'll win." Lisa agreed, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. They decided to take extra precautions, ensuring their communications were secure and their movements discreet. 2 weeks later, Naomi received a tip from an unexpected source. It was a former courthouse employee who had witnessed the corruption firsthand. They had decided to come forward, providing detailed information and documents that implicated even more officials. Naomi and Lisa worked tirelessly, verifying the new evidence and building a case that would be impossible to ignore. They knew the risks, but they also knew that the truth had to come out. The day finally came when they were ready to present their findings. Naomi and Lisa held a press conference, laying out the evidence for the world to see. The room was packed with reporters, and the story spread like wildfire. The public was outraged, demanding accountability and justice. The authorities had no choice but to launch a deeper investigation, uncovering even more corruption and leading to several high-profile arrests. Naomi and Lisa had succeeded once again, but the victory was bittersweet. They had faced danger and adversity, but they had also made a difference. They had shown that the truth could prevail, no matter how powerful the enemies. As Naomi walked through the courthouse corridors, she couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. She had faced racism, corruption, and danger, but she had also stood up for what was right. She had made a difference, and that was what mattered. Naomi knew that her fight for justice was far from over, but she was ready for whatever came next. She had proven that she was a force to be reckoned with, and she would continue to stand up for the truth, no matter the cost. As she stepped out into the sunlight, Naomi felt a sense of resolve. The fight for justice was never easy, but it was always worth it. And with allies like Lisa by her side, she knew they could take on whatever challenges lay ahead. In life, standing up for what's right often requires immense courage. Naomi Brooks didn't back down when faced with injustice. She confronted it head-on. Her story teaches us that even in the face of prejudice and corruption, one person's determination can bring about significant change. Always remember, fighting for justice isn't easy, but it's necessary. Be brave, be resilient, and always stand up for what you believe in. The truth will eventually prevail, and your actions can inspire others to do the same. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notification to be the first to know when interesting and lesson-packed stories like this one drop.